From Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 3 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
Thank you for joining the McLaughlin Group, a show where friends disagree agreeably. I'm your host, Tom Rogan. This week's panelists are author and columnist Pat Buchanan, columnist Eleanor Clift of the Daily Beast, columnist Clarence Page of the Chicago Tribune, and the conservative writer Ryan Gidusky. Okay, let's get to issue 1. Sondland's tale.
Mr. Giuliani was expressing the desires of the President of the United States, and we knew these investigations were important to the President.
Democrats in the House of Representatives accelerated their impeachment inquiry this week with new public hearings. Witnesses included Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, who offered sometimes tense exchanges with Republican questioners. But the week's impeachment show star was U.S. Ambassador to the European Union, Gordon Sondland. Sondland stated that there was a quote-unquote quid pro quo, namely for Ukraine to pledge to investigate the Bidens in return for a White House visit. Again, Republicans said it's hearsay.
Pat, did Sondland deliver a hammer blow for Democrats?
Sondland, no doubt, was the best witness the Democrats had all week. And what he said about the quid pro quo was it was there. Pence and Pompeo and all sorts of the leaders of the administration were in on it, knew about it. But by week's end, this turned out to be unsuccessful in the sense that the top witnesses called by Schiff in that hearing, every single one of them said, in our judgment, there was no crime, there was no bribery, there was no extortion. So at the end, this is what they've got, and they're going to send on to the Judiciary Committee. And I think with the realization, Will Hurd, who's a very critical of Trump, Republican, said he found nothing impeachable there. I think the Democrats are being forced to move ahead with what they know is an impeachment that's going to be rejected by the entire U.S. Senate. And I think they're thinking to themselves, what is the sense of doing this for the next 2 months?
Eleanor.
Gordon Sondland dropped the dime on the president. There's no dispute about what went on, that this was a conspiracy among administration insiders. Everyone was in the loop, the Secretary of State, the Vice President, the acting Chief of Staff. So what do you do with that? Do you just say, okay, he's the president, we let him get away with everything? No, you use the constitutional machinery that you have, and the expectation is that there will be likely 4 articles of impeachment: abuse of power, contempt of Congress, bribery, and obstruction of justice. And that will proceed to the Senate. And Pat is not making news here when he says the Senate is going to fail to convict the president. They're not going to exonerate him. But this has to be brought forward. And the parade of witnesses, it's not their job to say something is impeachable or a crime. They all testified as to what they saw and what they knew, and an impressive bunch of people, including Gordon Sondland, who decided he wasn't going to go down for this president. And the public servants, I think all Americans should be proud of the quality of these people. And the warning that Fiona Hill issued as the final witness, that basically what the Republicans are doing by trying to say the Ukrainians are the ones who were behind all of the intervention in the 2016 election. It's the Ukrainians, not the Russians. They are doing Russian President Putin's bidding. And that's what's at the heart of the question here. Can a president take an action that ultimately aids and abets a foreign hostile power and undermines an ally, Ukraine?
I thought that at the end of the questionnaire for Ambassador Sondland, though, he said President Trump did not ask him specifically for a quid pro quo, and I think that was the moment that I think that they lost any last Republican who may have voted for impeachment. And if you don't have Will Hurd, Elise Stefanik, who was very aggressively questioning all the witnesses. Elise Stefanik is a liberal Republican from New York. She is certainly not a Trump supporter, a vocal Trump supporter. If you don't have her, if you don't have Will Hurd, I doubt you're going to peel together anyone in the Senate. And then at this point, I think that the American people kind of ask, what was this all for? If there's no removal, what are we actually doing this all for? And it is an exercise in futility. I understand Eleanor's point, but I'm just seeing from the American voters' perspective of what are we going to get out of this?
Right.
Yeah, things do seem to be going in that direction. It's a tough case to make that the actual, well, since we do have apparent plans, efforts to influence the upcoming election, but the whole plot kind of fell apart because it didn't get to the point where Zelensky actually made the announcement Trump was looking for. I think what we're seeing here, though, is, as Eleanor said, some statement has to be made, some effort has to be made on the part of the Democrats to show that this is not okay. And the thing is, they're getting that pressure from the grassroots up. That otherwise, Nancy Pelosi wouldn't have gone this far. And also, the point has to be made here in this campaign season with the election coming up. I'm waiting to see if there's any serious effort on the part of some Republicans to at least get a censure to indicate that they don't approve of this behavior either. Because they keep talking about, I mean, their position now is, well, there was some misbehavior here, but it doesn't rise to the level of impeachment.
I think
What doesn't rise to the level?
Let me ask you something, and then
Sure.
we'll have a little exchange. But Eleanor and Clarence are making the case here, and I think there is some ground for it, that actually, regardless of the politics, it is the responsibility of Congress to hold the executive to account, and that at a moral level, at least, there is an import to doing this. What do you say to that?
Well, let me just say that there's no doubt about it that the many of the Republicans would say, look, there's a quid pro quo, say to themselves, there's a quid pro quo. It doesn't rise to the level of a crime. It doesn't rise to extortion. It's not bribery. It's not impeachable, but it's not nice either.
Right.
It's not the right thing to do. And so the question is, why the Democrats who have made this point repeatedly, why they would proceed with this process and take the country through this historic process for something we believe is unjustified to convict and remove the president when they know the outcome and when it just doesn't rise to that level. And that's what Republicans are saying. I think they're dead right.
Okay.
Well, that's the process that the founders gave us. I don't know what the alternative is. And we've had 3 impeachment proceedings in the past, and none of them have resulted in removal. But each of those presidents, I can't speak for President Johnson's state of mind, but President Nixon was forced to resign the presidency. That's a pretty high price to pay. President Clinton has said many times the fact that he was impeached will be in the first line of his obituary. It is not something to be proud of. So this, whether it may not result in his removal, it probably won't. But this is not something this president wants, and he will have to face the voters, and the voters will have an opportunity here. And people are now just processing what happened in those hearings. And excuse me, please. My name is Eleanor. If you'd like me to continue. The reason that Nancy Pelosi and a lot of Democrats were reluctant to proceed with impeachment was the fact that it's war. It's political war, and you can't wage war without public opinion. And they didn't have a public opinion.
Simple question.
Public opinion might still move.
Yeah.
Why put the country through this? For December, through Christmas, through Thanksgiving, through the new year, into the political season.
But surely you
when
want
you know the outcome.
Surely you want the country to go through this because it seems to be helping President Trump with the swing states.
Well, the whole process of an impeachment, taking it to the Senate and trial, I don't think is good for America, especially when every single Republican there is saying basically it doesn't rise to the level of impeachment. Go do what you want to do in the House. But to put the country through this, I think, is dreadful.
If it goes to the Senate, there's a very good chance that Joe and Hunter Biden are going to have to testify in the Senate. And if that happens, it can't possibly be good for Joe Biden's presidential campaign. And as the front runner still in the Democratic primary, it can't be good. And it might happen literally weeks before Iowa or the week of Iowa, depending on how Mitch McConnell sits there and sets it up. And he is a political animal.
If they decide not to do it, though, because there's really no evidence against Hunter Biden that anybody knows of. There's only suspicion elections, and everybody knows the appearances were terrible for him to be holding that board position while his father was vice president. But that's not impeachable either.
No, I'm not saying it is, but I'm saying it will be terrible looking for.
What's already terrible looking though for the.
I know, but then to put him on a trial in the Senate.
It actually may help the Democrats because that question mark over Biden's head maybe will be removed.
I don't know. He's on fourth place in Iowa. I don't know if that will actually help. I think.
Well, let's save that for the debate. That's our next issue. Eleanor.
Right. The Democrats will prosecute the case in the Senate. So the managers, the House managers come across and prosecute. The president can call witnesses. Do they want to turn it into a circus? I think there have to be certain rules of engagement that Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer will agree on. And I'm not sure Mitch McConnell wants to go down the Jim Jordan, Tea Party clown show that we saw that the Republicans put on in the House. I think that he understands that he's got several senators in swing states who have to deal with constituents who think this is a serious matter.
But public polling in most swing states show that most voters do not support impeachment at this point.
Susan Collins, Colorado, Arizona. I'm not so sure
The polling
and
shows,
they're the three senators who are on the bubble.
Okay, Kyrsten Sinema is not going to vote for it then. Joe Manchin probably won't vote for it.
We're not talking about voting for it. We're talking about taking it seriously.
But we might have a
not
bipartisan...
making fun of witnesses as possible double
agents.
We may have
bipartisanship on the opposite side. And Nate Silver does this polling analysis. It used to be 50% over for impeachment, and now impeachment and non-impeachment are dead even. It's not going, public opinion is not moving in the way of the Democrats.
Let's wait for Thanksgiving dinner.
Hold it, Eleanor. They raised the issue of these how distinguished and outstanding public servants these are, and they've served the country well. Some of them are veterans. That's well and good. But they also, when they came in, they all said the same thing, what the policy should be, and it's not being what wasn't what they wanted. When they said, that they talked about Russian aggression, they talked about national security involved, all the rest of it. These folks are good folks, but the point is they're the ones Republican conservatives and populists run against and come to Washington to change, and the President of the United States sets the policy, not these nice, decent folks who come up and tell us what it ought to be.
Concluding comment from Eleanor. Concluding comment.
This was not policy. This was an extortion scheme. This was a
Nobody says so.
A personal domestic errand. I'm quoting Fiona Hill.
Okay.
This was not a policy dispute. This was the administration led by the president shaking down the president of Ukraine, an ally, withholding American military aid in exchange for dirt on Biden.
No, we're moving on. Okay. I think as well, Eleanor mentioned it, Fiona Hill warning about Russian aggression, but the Democrats are deluding themselves if they think Vladimir Putin is going to be deterred by legislation. You've got to do cyber activity to get the Russians' attention. The old Moscow rules. All right, issue 2, Atlanta debate.
10 Democrats met in Atlanta this week to offer their competing narratives for the party's presidential nomination. It was a vibrant affair, with candidates aware that this is one of their final opportunities to shift party members in the run-up to the 2020 primaries. But enough from me. Let's get to the panel's verdict.
Who was the big winner? Who was the big loser?
Well, first of all, it was at the end of a very sobering day on Capitol Hill, and I think all of the people on the stage that evening understood the import of the moment and how they didn't want to be picking scabs off of each other when you've got all these big questions at play. I don't see big winners and big losers. I think everybody views these debates and you kind of see what you want to see. I thought Joe Biden had some good moments thinking on his feet about, do you prosecute Donald Trump after he leaves office, and basically saying it's up to the Attorney General to make that determination. And also going at Steyer, the billionaire, who said, I'm the only one here who will make climate change the number one priority. And Biden called him out on having made all his money in the coal industry. That was good. And I think Mayor Buttigieg, who is ahead in Iowa, he's kind of the darling of the Iowans for the moment, and nobody went after him. So he won in that sense.
Well,
Good analysis.
He tried to.
But the clear thing is what happens in these debates, what's important, is what's the takeaway. Once the debate is over, what are the clips?
Yeah.
And the clip was of Joe Biden saying, we're against the brutality to women. There's no cause except in self-defense. And we're going to stop that. We're going to punch and punch and punch. And it was preposterous. And what was the second thing he said? The only elected black senator woman in history endorsed me, and there's Kamala Harris saying, what about me?
Right.
Joe had a couple of
he
gaffes.
meant
Hold
at
it,
that
Eleanor.
time.
Hold it, Eleanor. A couple of gaffes. And these are the things that are being repeated and everybody's laughing about, and the late night talk shows are dealing with.
Okay, Clarence.
Well, Biden also has a problem. This was Atlanta, and they were trying to pitch to black voters, who are an essential group in the Democratic Party nationally. And Biden, that moment didn't help Biden's posture, especially with younger black voters, which he still has a problem with. But I didn't think there were any great breakout moments for anybody in this program. People's eyes were on Buttigieg because of his a great performance there in Iowa, but I didn't see any attacks directed at him, and the audience ratings were lower than before, partially because of exhaustion, I imagine, with the hearings that day as well. But I think we have yet to see who is going to really be the front runner for those early states.
Ryan, one of the things that struck me was Elizabeth Warren, the opening question, I thought was an incredibly idiotic answer she gave when she was asked, how do you persuade Republican colleagues in the Senate to potentially vote for conviction? And she said, tell them to reread the Mueller report. I mean, am I wrong? Am I right?
I thought that she seemed to fade throughout the entire debate. She wasn't even relevant. I don't remember a single thing Tom Steyer said whatsoever. Buttigieg didn't have any breakout moments, but he wouldn't get attacked, so I guess he's the winner. Amy Klobuchar was fine, but she was shaking the whole time for some unknown reason. And Biden was incoherent throughout most of the debate. He couldn't. His opening sentence, he stuttered through, and he stammered through it. And you can't do that for your opening line. And I was on impeaching Donald Trump. I didn't think there was I thought Bernie Sanders was fine, but at the end of it, I mean, every Democrat I spoke to came off that debate saying, wow, that was a mess, and they need to do something different.
It wasn't a mess. It was a number of important questions were asked. I thought the three women moderators did a great job. It was not a defining moment in the march towards the nomination. And I think Biden has gotten the wake-up call that he's got to up his game in Iowa, so we'll see that happens. And Pete Buttigieg still has the problem. If he wins Iowa, if he wins New Hampshire, then what? Because he doesn't have any backing in the black community. No. And Atlanta, of course, this is the home of Stacey Abrams, and she was on the air a lot. She's basically said she would be honored to serve with anyone who wins the nomination. And she's a phenomenon in the party. So she's turning into a believer.
Do you think she could jump in?
I don't see her jumping in, no.
Okay.
No.
She only lost by 50 or 60,000 votes, I think, down there in Georgia.
But she's got a great future.
1.4% she lost.
Okay.
But she's got a great future.
But this is your last chance to appeal to voters before Iowa. Joe Biden, in the new Civics poll that just came out on Friday, he's at 12%. I don't know what kind of alarm you have. Bloomberg and Deval Patrick are jumping in. Kamala Harris is just continually proves that she's the most unlikable person in this race. She went from being a front runner to being in 3% in Iowa. And the problem is there's Iowa, there's New Hampshire, and then Biden's going to count on South Carolina. But California's very quickly afterwards, and he's neck and neck. And if he loses California even by 2 or 3 points, that's dozens of delegates.
And he's burned through all of his money, and he didn't have that much to begin with. And so you get into Super Tuesday with 40% of the delegates. I think both Texas and California are in there. He's going to have to run on momentum, and if he loses Iowa and loses New Hampshire, even if he wins South Carolina, where's the momentum?
Well, I still think Biden's holding his own, and what we could be looking at is 3 or 4 candidates going the distance without anyone getting enough delegates to win the nomination outright. And then there's going to be
poker convention.
Well, I actually think there'll be horse trading before they get to that. So there could be there could be a number of kingmakers. Bernie
but what do you-
Sanders will have some
For
delegates.
the benefit of our
What do you
audience,
do with, what do you do with
for the benefit of our audience at home, nothing excites Washington journalists more than the prospect of a brokered convention.
No.
We haven't had one since how long ago,
The
Pat?
50s.
The reason we
1952?
haven't is because you only need 50% of the vote to win. And the first person makes a deal with the third person for VP, cuts out the second person, and that's how you get there.
That's that.
When you have a party like this, what do you do with a Bernie Sanders? Well, I mean, did you adopt his platform? Because his supporters,
better be
they
nice to
will
him.
sit out.
Be nice to him. That's
I
right.
guess
That's
so,
right.
but they will sit out.
Exactly.
His supporters will sit out.
Black supporters will sit out too. They sat out on Hillary Clinton. That was a big reason why
Right,
she
but
won.
I mean, what do you do with Pete Buttigieg? You have a Pete Buttigieg ticket? I mean, imagine what black voters would do then. There's a lot of these people are toxic to other segments of the Democratic primary.
If you're going to have a white woman or a white male as candidate, you've got to have, I think, a black woman. I think it's almost mandatory for the Democrats because that's the real group that's got to really come out to put them over the top against Trump.
Biden,
that can be done.
Biden, Abrams.
Biden. All right, so Eleanor says Biden, Abrams. Pat, what say you?
Biden reached out to Abrams earlier already, and she brushed it off. She seems more interested now.
Yes.
Who's your ticket? Who's going to be the ticket?
I really, I think Warren's still got a shot at it, but I wouldn't bet as much on her as I
want
would have
names.
bet.
Come on, pick some names.
Let's see, who's Klobuchar? How's she doing?
5% in Iowa, and it's our high water mark. So
That's a tough state.
So what are you? Klobuchar, Abrams?
No, I'm kidding. I would still bet on Warren as number one. I have trouble seeing Joe Biden get through this thing.
I think Warren hurt herself though this past week when she backed off of her. She did the right thing. She backed off of the idea of Medicare for all, including those of us who already have policies that we don't want to drop right now. And she just wanted backing off of that for good reasons. So a lot of folks on the party's left are upset. Others of a more moderate stature are relieved.
Yeah.
But she still
But
has
she's
to get her legs
still
as a candidate.
her wealth tax now, it's 2 cents on every dollar after your first 50 billion. I mean, I can
50
handle
million,
that.
isn't it?
50 billion or 50
Million.
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 Okay, I
The billion,
can't
it's up
tell.
to
I can't tell the
6%, I
difference.
think. I had to check that out.
Anyway,
It's very important to me.
all right, you can handle it. Okay, but then she has it, covering student loan debt, universal pre-care. She has a long list of things it's going to cover.
Bad math.
Is there that much money?
I
She's
don't
Jeremy
know.
Corbyn on math.
Yeah.
No, she's been very slow about paying for all of this, and this is an era in which, especially when the economy is doing well.
Well, all right,
That's why
let me ask you,
good
and
question.
who's going to be the nominees then? Top of the ticket and bottom of the ticket.
Boy, I wish I knew, Tom. No, really, this is one of the most we haven't even had our first caucus yet. I've seen the Democrats
Your
and
wish
Republicans.
list, your wish ticket. Let's
who's
not
your
make
wish
it
ticket?
Well, I still want Sherrod Brown, but he ain't running.
Okay, all right.
Maybe he will now.
Okay, all right.
Come on, Sherrod. The
So
call is
there.
coming out.
SNL, when they covered Elizabeth Warren, they said, math doesn't exist. And that's exactly where I think her problem was in this presidential campaign.
Okay, so let's do an exit question on a scale of 1 to 100. 1 being the probability of escaping a black hole, and if you're sucked into the vortex, and 100 being the certainty that I am right, or let's say 99 about the UFOs. What probability that Joe Biden is the nominee? 1 to 100.
I would say Biden is probably 35 or 40.
Okay, Eleanor.
I say 65.
25.
Ooh, 50.
I think I'm a 51. I think it's going to be. I think Joe Biden still has a little shot there. But if it's not Joe Biden, who do you think it is, Pat?
I would say maybe Buttigieg.
Okay, interesting. Eleanor.
I think Warren.
Okay.
Bernie Sanders.
I'm going to pick Buttigieg just because that's. I think if Biden doesn't make it, he's a natural choice.
Okay,
folks.
All right. I think it's going to be Buttigieg as well. That guy has some charisma there. Okay. So, predictions, Pat.
I think Bibi Netanyahu's career, which is longer in the prime ministership than David Ben-Gurion, is over. The indictments on 3 counts there, I think, are going to force him to resign as prime minister. Then the Israelis will put together a new government.
Eleanor.
A judge will rule on Monday about whether Don McGahn, the former White House counsel, has to obey a subpoena from Congress. If that's affirmative, that has the ability to shake up the witness list that could still appear before the Democratic committee.
Good prediction. Right.
Nikki Haley is going to a fundraiser in Dallas, as it's called the Future 2024, and I'm going to predict that Nikki Haley will never be president of the United States of America.
Okay.
So,
Clarence.
busting that bubble way ahead of
We'll
time.
remember that in 2024.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'll meet you in 2050. We'll see who won. But Betsy DeVos, Secretary of Education, is going to do something about student debt relief, especially for those who are the victims of fraudulent schools. It won't be enough to satisfy, well, let me be very vague. It won't be enough to satisfy a lot of folks, but it will be a move in the right direction.
How do you rate Betsy DeVos as Education Secretary, Eleanor? I thought I'd get that
That's a
look.
tough one.
D minus.
D minus. Pat, what are you?
I think she's excellent and very courageous.
A plus.
C.
Yeah, I think C plus, but there's room for improvement.
Okay, I'll give her a B, just to be in the middle there. I predict that Gideon Sa'ar will be the next Prime Minister of Israel, flowing off what Pat said. He's the Likud insurgent who's broken away from Netanyahu's erstwhile firewall. So that will be interesting. But certainly Israeli politics very exciting at the moment. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. See you next time.